And welcome back to Take Action News, everybody. So glad to have you with us on our third hour. You know that introduction can only mean one thing, and it's time for the segment where we tell you what's going on in the world of social media and what you can do to learn from it. Alan Rosenblatt, Dr. Digipol on Twitter. Dr. Alan Rosenblatt joins us. Alan, welcome to the show.
Thanks, David. Good to be here.
Alan, this, as you know, this is our first show where we're, in addition to broadcasting on our syndicated stations and in D.C. and on the Internet, we also have a YouTube channel, Take Action News TV, and we now have your picture up on our YouTube channel. And I got to say, Alan, remember that segment when you talked about why you sometimes get pulled over in some southern states because people want to check your papers? I understand now.
Well, you know, what can I say?
You're a good-looking guy. You're a good-looking guy and an interesting guy to look at, but I can understand why some southern police may think, wait a second, where's he from?
Yep. I think I was once accused of being a Cuban hitman.
Tens of millions, probably hundreds of millions of lives.
Alan, I got to ask you about some stuff that's going on this week in terms of social media. On Thursday, Twitter just blew up because of the news that Senator Jim DeMint, Republican from South Carolina, announced that he was leaving the United States Senate to head to the Heritage Organization, which is a conservative think tank, and Twitter went crazy over the news. Tell us about it.
Yes, Thursday, Twitter went absolutely crazy over Jim DeMint announcing that he was going to be resigning at the end of the year, 4 years before his Senate term is up, to go head the Heritage Foundation. And last I checked, it was just, you know, there were so many tweets coming out that everyone I could see on the screen said tweeted now, with no time delay. And it ranged from people just simply retweeting or tweeting about the fact that he was doing this. Some people, you know, I tried to start a hashtag on Heritage moves right by, you know, moves right, Heritage moves right, to try to see if people could talk about, you know, the impact of getting the head of the Tea Party caucus in the Senate now going over to run the Heritage Foundation. To me, I mean, this becomes a question of, you know, how do you get somebody with that kind of anti-science, anti-research, anti-data-driven decision-making coming out of the Senate, going over to run what is supposed to be a legitimate think tank. And I just wonder if whatever vestige of credibility Heritage has as a real research think tank is completely destroyed by this particular move. But it's an interesting challenge and an interesting development, and I'm curious to see how it evolves over the next week. He starts in January. He steps down from the Senate at the end of December.
The jokes almost write themselves. Heritage, which claims to be a think tank, Jim DeMint, somebody who's not, I don't know, you wouldn't associate him with this sort of deep thinking in the United States Senate or logical thinking. Was that part of the drumbeat on Twitter, were sort of the jokes and the puns that was going along with this?
You know, to be honest, it really wasn't. I tried. I mean, I tried to start people talking about how, you know, Heritage would now staff would now be required to drink tea daily, and things along those lines. But no, it just it seemed to be pretty straightforward. You know, there are some articles out talking about how extreme Jim DeMint is, but then there are other articles talking about how the likely successor to him to be appointed to take his seat by conservative Governor Nikki Haley are likely to be as extreme as DeMint is.
What are some of the lessons we can draw about news and how it breaks on Twitter and how we should all react to it?
Well, I think that, you know, we've talked about this in the past, but I think the really important thing is when you see something break on Twitter, if there's no link on it, you should go search on Google or Yahoo or Bing and figure out what it is, you know, find some corroborating evidence. If there's a link on it, you should click through and check the source to make sure it's a credible source. In other words, Twitter's a great place to identify potential breaking news leads, but always verify.
Alan, you had an opportunity to moderate a panel last week, including President Obama's Chief Technology Officer, Michael Slaby, and also Romney's Deputy Campaign Director of Digital Media, Matt Lira. And there were also folks from Facebook, Twitter, and Google. What were some of the things that they talked about learning in terms of digital media, social media, over the last campaign?
Well, just, you know, clarify, Michael Slaby was Chief Integration and Innovation Officer, so he oversaw the CTO, the CIO, and the Chief Analytics Officer. So he was responsible for all the data integration. And Matt Lira, as Deputy Director, also was the Director of Paul Ryan's VP strategy. So they were right in the thick of things. And one of the I sort of identified three key innovations or three key developments in the last presidential election in terms of the online strategy. One was a much deeper dive into social media. I think we may have talked in the past about how the president had a robust, not just a national level social media presence, but a Obama for America presence in each and every state on Twitter and Facebook, so that they had been in place for quite some time. The second thing is a lot of the nano-targeted ads that we've talked about in the past in my segments were very prevalent in this election. But I think perhaps the really interesting and biggest development was the degree of data integration in the campaigns, and this particularly, while it probably had a big impact on the winning and who won and who lost. It takes about a year to really build up a fully integrated digital data integration system. So where the Romney campaign couldn't really invest in this kind of stuff until after the primaries were settled, and so had not nearly the lead time. The Obama campaign had started building this integration system well over a year before the election, and was really developing. Had developed a really great deal of capacity to bring in lots and lots of data and to make it work. The only other campaign that in history that, in modern history, that had that kind of data integration, although not as much data given it was earlier in history, was the Bush re-election campaign in 2004. And as you can see, there's a theme there. The incumbent running for re-election has more time to set up these systems before the re-election campaign effort, because they know they're going to be the nominee, or they're, in both those cases insured. Zach Moffett was told to Hill in an interview a few days ago that if he does this again, he was Romney's digital campaign director. In the future, if he does this, he'll do it for an incumbent because of this advantage. But that said, you have to think in terms of there's a whole bunch of different kinds of data that we can work with. There's, at the individual level, you have the voter file, which is just this publicly available file of who's registered to vote, what party they're registered for, and where they live. And to that, over time, we have appended email addresses. And with email addresses, we can then search and find a large percentage of them, what their Twitter handles are, if they're on Twitter, what their Facebook account is, if their homepage is, if they're on Facebook, what their LinkedIn profile is. And with that, all of a sudden, you can pull in enormous amounts of data about where they are, what they're talking about. With LinkedIn, you can pull in their resume. I mean, all this kind of stuff, which really gives... And then if you can then pull in their social media activities, one of the advantages of having people register on myBarackObama.com the first time around in 2008 is that you could then start tracking the kinds of things that they did on your behalf on social media.
So you can then leverage that the next time around in 2012.
Right, but in general, you're getting this real-time flow of data. Then, for individuals. Then on top of that, you have all of this trending data about what's going on social media. You've got, as we talked about when we talked about DS Political a few months ago, you've got people matching to voter files, people's web surfing history, so that we know what websites they're looking at, which allows the ad agencies to then target the right websites more accurately based on the people who could vote for you, that are likely to vote for you, that might vote for you, and where they're going, and make sure the ads are there. So we have both an individual level and a macro level. Now, interestingly, Michael Slaby on the panel that I moderated really kind of hit the nail on the head when he said, look, don't get lost in the data. It isn't about getting more data, it's about getting more insight.
And by insight, that enables you as a campaign then to feed the right information to your supporters and make sure that they then are tapping into their network of friends and colleagues.
Absolutely, and interesting, how we always talk about, it's like getting the right message to the right voter. Michael Slaby added the context of get the right message from the right messenger to the right voter, so that not only are we getting the right information and the right message to people, but we're using the right messenger. Either it's a celebrity or it's a friend of theirs through social media, or it's somebody local and prominent in their community. The more we know about them, the more we know who their influencers are. So, for example, if you know their clout scores, if you know their Twitter handles, you can go look up on Clout and see who their influencers are. And target their influencers to get your message out, so that these people who are influenced by them are much more likely to be influenced by your message.
And I imagine that the political campaign was all about politics, that there are a lot of folks in business and industry who are also looking at the social media lessons as they try to launch their advertising campaigns and try to figure out how they can get their products in front of certain people.
Well, it certainly seems like that should be the case, and increasingly it will be the case. I have had the opportunity to meet with people from some of the major PR firms in recent weeks and months, and they're still on the learning curve on this stuff too.
That's why you, Alan Rosenblatt, are going to make a ton of money advising all these businesses and companies how to take advantage of social media. Alan
From
Rosenblatt.
your lips to God's ear.
Alan Rosenblatt, Dr. Digipole on Twitter. Alan, thanks for being part of the program. As always, great stuff on the radio, also on YouTube. For anybody who missed it, Take Action News TV on YouTube. You can see what our friend Alan Rosenblatt looks like. He's a good-looking man. Take Action News continues with our Activist of the Week next.